Ryung Ha-sung was a peasant boy who grew up to become a ruthless, bloodthirsty assassin, single-handedly wiping out the largest crime organization in Asia. However, his entire life changes when he comes face-to-face with the girl who shot him in the throat as a kid. After killing a bunch of peasants, Ryung Ha runs out of bullets when a lone bounty hunter approaches. When he throws down his pistol, Chateau pulls out a second one, but he gets close and disarms her. She pistol whips him, but he grabs her collar and throws her down. Ryung Ha asks if she was a new bounty hunter, since he knew every assassin in the area. He pulls out his phone, starts taking selfies of her, and asks for her name. For someone with an enormous bounty on his head, he doesn't get the chance to rizz up baddies much. About a month later, Chateau receives a call from her boss, asking where she's been, but she hangs up. Jim wasn't surprised, since he always spoiled her. Richland's father's benefactor was her father, so he felt obligated to take care of her. Jim asks why she became a bounty hunter, but Richland never inquired about it. Apparently, she'd been catching multiple villains over the past month. Jim thought she was either an excellent hunter or had someone powerful behind her. Meanwhile, Ryung Ha keeps spamming Chateau with texts asking to crack. He stalks her, catches bodies, and even cleans up crime scenes for her. One day, he sends her a video of him torturing a mafia member and asks if she's interested. Chateau and Richland arrive at an intelligence agency and meet with a client. He briefs them on a target named Ryung Ha-sung. He appeared 8 years ago and was hired as an interpreter for the Santukai, the most powerful crime organization in Asia. They were dissolved 5 years ago after Ryung Ha slaughtered 18 executive members and the leader in a single night. After the meeting, Richland wonders why so many organizations were after Ryung Ha. Many were reaching out specifically about him. He asks Chateau not to go after him alone, explains the dangers of the job, and tries convincing her to quit. He suddenly gets a call from his ugly wife and dumps the check on Chateau. However, Ryung Ha was sitting at a table over and offered to pay for it. After buying her some fruit juice, Chateau outright asks what his terms were for the man in the video. Ryung thinks she was pretty direct for someone who never answers the phone. When he asks how much the man was even worth, she gets pissed and demands to know what he wanted from her. She asks if he was just mocking her. Ryung grabs her arm and says that was rude. She wasn't going to find another sugar poppy like him, so she should be more courteous. She suddenly squeals from his grip strength, then kicks the table over and attempts to tase him, but he dodges. Chateau tries to pull away, but he's too strong. Ryung then offers his terms with a pinky promise. On December 24th, they were to have a date. Hours later, Ryung washes his face at a dirty motel and starts walking out. The street lizard panics and starts texting, saying he still had time left on the clock. Ryung pulls out a pistol and executes a man on the other side of the door. He picks up his phone, answers, and asks if he still had time on the clock. On Christmas Eve, Jim puts up a Christmas tree using company funds, making Richland furious because they're brokies. He convinces Richland to go out with him since it was a holiday. When Chateau arrives, Ryung is salty because she was an hour late for their date. Since he was in a sour mood, Chateau suggests rescheduling, but Ryung cheers up instantly. He calls her out on being late on purpose, hoping he'd leave, but she gives him a death stare. When they pass Icebox Jewelry, Ryung asks if she likes stuff like that, but she says it's pointless. He sneaks in close and diddles her hair aside, revealing her pierced ears, which pisses her off even more. He asks if she wanted him to reopen them for her, but she declines. They look over desserts, but Chateau gives him no play at all. Afterwards, she starts walking faster and faster away from him, but he suddenly declares this doesn't count as a date if she wouldn't walk next to him, causing her to slow back down. Chateau says this was a bad idea since he had an enormous bounty on his head, and he agrees. He wanted to wait for the Christmas lights, but suggested heading back to the hotel room to crack instead. Chateau gets frustrated and walks off. After sending her a meat stick pic, she instantly changes her mind. At the hotel, Chateau looks over the photo of the dead target and is confused. She says she had no idea why he was interested in her. Ryung doesn't feel that way at all and wonders why she insists on making it a transaction when all he wanted was to help her. Chateau thought there was nothing more frightening than something that's free. After dinner, Richland spots Chateau being rizzed up by Ryung Ha-sung. Chateau says this was as far as he goes, but Ryung thinks that was cruel since he canceled their room for her. Even the hotel staff thought his rizz was non-existent and looked at him with extreme sympathy. Before departing, Ryung suddenly grabs her and says her scent doesn't bother him. Everyone else smells putrid to him, but she smells just fine. She slaps his hand away and walks into the station. On the way home, Chateau remembers the feeling of Ryung's touch and is utterly disgusted. Meanwhile, Ryung walks down the street but is being stalked by a random bum. He thinks his old friend Ryung is being careless trying to pick up women. The following day, Richland stresses at the thought of Ryung making contact with Chateau. He tries calming himself down by saying he never saw her face, but the cheeks looked awfully familiar. Jim informs him Chateau called earlier saying she was working in the field today. Apparently, she received a tip to catch a villain. Upon hearing this, Richland realizes she was truly being cracked by an international criminal. Meanwhile, Chateau is led to a storage unit where Ryung tortured and left the target for her. He thinks she was impatient, saying he would have brought her there himself. She arrives at an ugly green unit covered in bloodstains. He informs her it had been a few days, so the body was already rotting inside. However, Chateau doesn't respond and opens it up. Inside, she discovers the dead target's wife as well. After the transaction, Ryung suggests going out for dinner, but she hangs up. He gets to the 18th floor and bodies both guards immediately. He opens the door and kills the client who fed Ritzland information on him. After loading up the bodies, Chateau receives a call from Ritzland informing her the client, who just hired them, was just killed and to hurry back. On the way back, a man with a diddler tattoo spies on her and begins trailing her. Ryung calls her, but she ignores him. She suddenly notices the biker behind her quickly catching up. After passing her, he pulls out his Glock and starts shooting. One bullet pops her tires, causing her to drive into him and smash his dumbass to pieces. A truck comes around the corner, forcing her to swerve and drive off the cliff. Ryung keeps calling but finds it odd because the call keeps ringing. Usually, she would forward his calls if he blew her up. The truck driver gets out to check on the biker, but before he can call an ambulance, the biker executes him in cold blood. Chateau wakes up and starts kicking the door out. When she finally climbs out, she vaguely remembers what happened and tries calling the office, but it starts raining. The biker catches up to her and is surprised she survived, calling it the devil's luck. Back at the crash site, Ryung finds the dead trucker and his phone, realizing foul play was involved. He walks over to the cliff and sees the love of his life's car at the bottom. Meanwhile, Chateau runs from the deranged diddler in the rain, but slips and falls into the mud. She pulls out her pistol, but he kicks it away, then kicks her in the chest. He tells her to settle down and says he just wants to talk, but her phone starts ringing. Ryung is at the crash site calling her phone. When the other side picks up, he hears the rain and realizes she's close. He sends a shot upward, and judging by the sound, he concludes she's within a few hundred meters. The man drops the phone and tells Chateau he feels bad for her getting involved with Ryung. He admits he never thought Ryung would be interested in women, and this discovery was worth risking his life over. He points the gun, says it's time for Ryung to face his punishment, and calls him a traitor. Moments later, Ryung arrives at Chateau's location and picks her up. Elsewhere, Ritzland continues blowing up Chateau's phone, but has no luck. However, Jim thinks it's not a big deal, since Chateau does this all the time. He's sure she'll be back the next day like nothing happened, but Ritzland couldn't stop worrying. Later that night, Chateau wakes up alone in a random room. After his shower, Ryung walks out and asks if she's alright. He tells her she has a fever and tries checking on her, but she grabs his hand and demands to know if he was behind everything. Ryung asks if she seriously believes that's true. After she lets go, he apologizes and admits he didn't see it coming at all. Chateau suddenly remembers the washed-up bimbo and asks if he got her out of her car. Unfortunately, she was crushed in the back seat, and he apologizes again. He asks what happened. Chateau explains that on the way back, she was ambushed. It was a young man on a motorcycle she had never seen before. He had a spiderweb tattoo on his left cheek. Ryung remembers something but notices her fever returning and suggests she lie down for now. However, Chateau shoves his squinty-eyed face aside. After tucking her in, Ryung pulls out her phone with the bullet, traces his steps from when he found her, removes the bullet, and vaguely remembers a bum from his past. On the other side of town, bootleg Spider-Man promises an old friend, Sung Woo, that he'll deal with Ryung Ha Sung soon enough. At night, Chateau dreams about a boy putting her to sleep during times of hardship when she was young. The following morning, Ryung opens the blinds and says, "Good morning, sunshine." When Chateau gets up looking like a depressed, lonely hag, he realizes she wasn't a morning person at all, and morning noggin wasn't an option. She was still filthy, so he suggested taking a shower before they checked out. During her cleansing, Chateau remembers blaming him the night before for her ambush and being knocked off a cliff. She hears a disturbance and looks outside to see Ryung passing by. Looking back, she notices a towel where her clothes were and realizes the diddler snuck in and swapped them out. When Ryung gets back, he finds her rolled up into a burrito on the bed. Chateau asks what he did with all of her clothes. With a jolly smile, he says they were covered in mud, so he took everything to the laundromat, underwear, jacket, and all. When Chateau gets pissed, Ryung asks if she was telling him women's panties aren't machine washable, but she thought that wasn't the point. He reassures her he didn't take a sniff, but she smashes his face with a pillow. The socially awkward assassin is confused and thinks she was super serious about folding clothes. One load of laundry later, Ryung returns with everything and says they were nice and warm. Once they check out, Chateau reports the situation to Ritzland from a payphone. After the call, Ryung asks if she was in trouble for having a fling, but she just walks off. He offers her a ride, but she says the office was sending a car. Ryung says he has something for her, then pulls out her busted-up phone. It was worthless, and her car was completely totaled as well. When she takes the phone, she apologizes for all the trouble she caused him. Ryung thinks that was unexpected. However, he wasn't upset, other than the fact she got hurt, and now he knew exactly what was going on. He preferred a thank you very much over an apology, which made her furious. Chateau then relays the assassin's message about him facing his punishment for being a traitor. After waving her off, Ryung walks to his car and has flashbacks of his past. 5 years ago, Ryung was an executive nominee for the Santukai group, and Ho was upset about it. Seung-woo tells him the boss was going to announce it that night, and it was a done deal. Ho is outraged, claiming the little punk had only been around for 3 years. Seung tells him to calm down, because even if Ryung got nominated, he wouldn't get the promotion for another 10 years. Ryung flushes, comes out of the stall, and tells Seung the other executives would be there soon before asking for a moment of his time. Seung apologizes for Ho's outburst, but Ryung agrees with him. He didn't think he was cut out for an executive position. Apparently, it had been eating Ho up inside since he joined the group first, and Seung asks Ryung to be gentle with him. Later that night, Ryung greets an executive who just arrived while Ho pouts like a little girl. After the executives arrive, Seung has a puff on the balcony, and Ryung comes to check on him. Seung warns Ryung to stop antagonizing the low-rank peasants, otherwise he'd become a target himself. There was something about him that provoked Ho, so Seung arranged dinner for the three of them the following night. However, Ryung pulls out a silenced pistol and puts 2 in his skull for his old friend, then proceeds to murder the rest of the executives. Back in the present, Ritzlin scolds Chateau for not answering her phone and driving off a cliff like a typical sandwich maker. He demands an explanation, but Chateau is exhausted and decides to catch some Z's. At the office, Ritzlin tells Chateau he needed more than a bow and an apology. She gives no explanation, but offers to pay for the car. Ritzlin sighs and asks if she'd been in contact with Ryung Ha-sung. Moments later, Chateau walks out in silence, while Ritzlin holds his head from the gunshot wound he experienced from her answer. That evening, Chateau strolls through the hood, passing the low-life scum of the earth. She reaches her rundown apartment and sighs. Once inside, she's greeted by the diddler stalker once again. He thinks the place was too rundown, but she asks him to just leave. When she reaches for the keyhole, he's suddenly standing beside her like a neglected husband. Ryung asks if she was going to invite him in and says he brought her a gift from a new shop that opened up. He had to wait in line for half an hour and thought it wasn't nice if she'd ignore him. Chateau considers leaving him outside, but can't let a criminal set up camp, then sighs. Once inside, Ryung realizes it was a studio apartment and asks if she didn't want a bed. When she drinks from the tap, he mentions he brought cream puffs, so they didn't need milk or sugar for their tea. Ryung notices a familiar face in a portrait and asks if the pair were her parents. When she says it wasn't his business, he gives her a cold stare. Ryung admits she was right, but says he was still interested because he was interested in her. Chateau sits on the floor, tired of his antics. Ryung asks if she got in trouble with the office, then taunts her for being placed on probation. She tells him they were now aware she was in contact with him. Ryung doesn't think much of it and says Ritzlin shouldn't get involved. Now that their company had made plenty of profit from his intel, they'd be the ones in trouble if word got out. They'll probably continue using him until they order her to get rid of him. What she does was entirely up to her. Chateau can't understand. He knows he's putting his life in jeopardy by contacting her. She can't see what he had to gain by continuing this business relationship. Ryung smiles and asks about her. He brings up the fact she was almost assassinated because of his past. He asks if she was so worried why she hadn't outright rejected him yet. She could have ambushed and captured him many times using her company's resources. When she asks what he wanted from her, the house phone suddenly begins ringing. It rings for a moment before going to voicemail. Ryung asks if she was going to pick up, but the message is from her foster mother, saying the anniversary of her father's death was coming up soon and asking her to come by for a visit. Ryung apologizes for coming at a bad time, then warns her not to let strangers in next time. He tells her he'll contact her again before walking out, leaving Chateau sitting in silence. Days later, Chateau visits her foster father's grave and promises to return again soon. Meanwhile, Ritzlin visits her mother's place, where their ugly dog happily greets him. Anna thanks him for being friends with Chateau since childhood. It's been so long that the old hag can't even remember how old he is. Ritzlin admits he's only 25, but came to ask her questions about Chateau. A decrepit nun approaches Chateau and informs her someone is waiting for her in the church, but she's already aggravated. When she enters, the squinty-eyed diddler is sitting in the middle row. She walks past without saying a word, even when he calls out. Chateau thinks he must be bored to stalk her into the cemetery, but he claims he has a full schedule keeping his women happy. She thinks his presence is blasphemy to the church and asks him to leave. He asks to hang out, but she coldly declines. Ryung asks what else she has going on since she's currently on probation. Meanwhile, the old hag outside sees a couple of dirty bums approaching. Chateau ignores him and walks toward the door. The men outside start assaulting the old lady, causing her to drop the watering can. Chateau suddenly hears it, and Ryung immediately notices too, before reaching for his pistol. The men crack the door open for a peek, but Ryung points up and blows his brains out. Ryung switches sides and headshots another through the wall. The third starts running, but gets his back blown out with a .45 caliber bullet to the spine. Chateau comes out, sees the mess, and notices the old hag is missing. Ryung kicks the man's pistol away and asks if this was orchestrated by someone. When he doesn't answer, he puts another bullet in his back. The man reveals they were actually after the girl and didn't know Ryung would be there. Ryung turns back to Chateau, but she's already gone. Chateau runs in another direction and finds the nun kidnapped by the man from the other day, who removes his shiesty mask and tells her to drop the weapon and kick it away. After she complies, Hu stomps on the nun and tells her to get on her knees with her hands behind her head. When he approaches with handcuffs, she pulls out a taser, moves in, and electrocutes him in the gut. However, it has no effect, and he proceeds to give her top-tier birth control. He claims his nerves were fried from all the drugs he used to do, so a stun gun had no effect on him. He's a straight fiend. Back at Anna's place, Ritzland asks why Chateau took on the occupation of a bounty hunter. Anna believes she was searching for something. After all, she and her husband took everything away from her. She was so little at the time, but they changed her family name and erased her past regardless. Ryung arrives at the location Chateau was taken and finds her subcompact 9mm. The old hag wakes up from her beauty sleep as he approaches Chateau's foster father's grave. He calls her phone, but Hu answers instead. Ryung casually greets him, but Ho tells him not to get cocky since the men he sent after him were low-life scum. Ho starts laughing like a maniac and says he wishes he could see his face right now, but Ryung calmly asks what he wants. Meanwhile, Anna reveals to Ritzland that 17 years ago, they found Chateau in an abandoned car with an unidentified dead boy in the driver's seat. Abel, the detective on the scene, was informed the time of death was over 7 hours ago. His passport stated his name was Ryung Ha Sung, but they needed to confirm if it was forged. Abel introduces himself to Chateau, but her stomach growls. He asks if she wants something to eat, but she just shakes her head. Apparently, she's been like that with everyone since waking up. He says he lives nearby and offers to make her lunch. The woman rejects the idea, saying he'll get in trouble, but Abel claims he was retiring soon, so it didn't matter. When they make it home, Abel informs Anna she's a person of interest in his new case and prepares lunch for two. While eating, Anna notices her good manners and thinks it would have been wonderful if they had a child when they were younger. From the outside, it looked like a kidnapping and organized crime case. However, they found no records of her ever existing. When they arrive at the station, the men interrogate her, asking her real name and where she came from, but she remains silent. Abel begins walking her into the morgue, but the woman objects, saying she should just be shown a photo. Abel disagrees and feels she should see it in person. They take her to Ryung Ha Sung's body and ask if she knew him, but she doesn't. The investigation eventually goes cold and she is taken away. 1 month later, Abel retires, and Anna asks if he was satisfied with his work. Upon hearing this, he immediately thinks of Chateau being taken away. They arrive at the orphanage and are informed Chateau never adapted and couldn't fit in. The man opens a dark room and calls out to her, but she scoots back into the corner. Abel walks in without permission and asks Chateau if she wants to go home with him. After she reaches out, the pair adopts her into the family, and she takes on the Dankworth last name. However, there was one problem with the case. Like the girl, the dead boy named Ryung Ha Sung was ultimately deemed not to have existed. In the present, Ryung enters the warehouse where Hu is stationed. Ryung thinks he's changed, but Hu never expected him to actually come after him over a hostage. He thinks he's gone soft. When Ryung asks where the girl is, Ho becomes pissed and demands to know if he forgot his crimes from 5 years ago. Ryung, however, thinks it's a shame. Sung-woo's last wish before he died was for the two of them to get along. Hearing this, Ho jumps down the stairs and pulls out a blade, but Ryung already has one above him and fires. He misses, and Ho slams his shoulder into the wall. Ryung dodges the blade, outmaneuvers him, and blasts a hole through his shoulder blade. Ho tries taking off his head, but Ryung deflects it with the barrel, kicks him in the gut, and puts another bullet into his chest. Ryung asks once more where the girl is, but Ho asks if she was really that important to him, revealing he stuffed the car with dynamite. However, Chateau wakes up and escapes just before the explosion. Ho tells him to rot in hell and rushes in with the blade, but Ryung fires 3 more bullets into his chest. In the past, Hu was an addicted bum when Sung-woo took him in. The men ridiculed him for being a common peasant, but Sung-woo always pulled him away. Back in the present, Hu collapses to the ground with a smile. Ryung thinks he was some kind of lunatic charging into a rain of bullets and asks if he fried his brain or something. He was impressed impressed with his resolve, then pulled the knife from his side. Meanwhile, Chateau coughs from the smoke while crawling out restrained, but collapses to the floor. Moments later, Squinty Batman finally arrives. He helps her up and sees her injured leg. Instead of carrying her romantically, he throws her over his shoulder like an unwanted hostage. Afterward, Ryung stands outside watching the warehouse burn with Hao's ugly body inside. Chateau asks if he finished his business. Ryung happily asks if she was curious, but she has absolutely no interest in his criminal activities. After joking around, he still thinks something is odd and tells her to stay cautious. Ryung asks if he did anything nasty to her, saying he was so worried he could have croaked and died. Chateau thinks being kidnapped and blown up already counted. Ryung reaches for her face, then slowly collapses. She looks out and sees him lying in a puddle of his own blood. Meanwhile, a twink calls to report the plan failed and asks which one he should kill first. Chateau Noble or Ryung Ha-sung. In town, Jim receives a text from Ritzland asking him to lock up the office. However, a car he walks past suddenly rolls down the window, revealing Chateau asking for help. Jim looks inside and sees an injured man leaking blood in the back seat. They take him to a black market doctor who treats his wounds, but suggests getting proper care and tells them to leave in the morning. While watching over him, Jim pulls Chateau aside and asks about her injuries after seeing her limp. He tells her to get some rest and says he'll make a status report to Ritzland. When she turns around, Ryung is already good as new. She informs him her colleague helped locate this accommodating clinic, and another one would be coming soon. Ryung asks what her plan is, but she claims she'll accidentally doze off and pretend she didn't notice his escape. He laughs at her, saying that was a lame excuse, but his wound starts opening up. He asks what she'll do when she admits to her boss she contacted him again, but she says it's her problem. Ryung calls her out on this exhausting routine and offers to take her away from there. He touches her face, but she pokes his wound. She tells him to worry about himself and hurry up and leave. Chateau informs him the car could be tracked and suggests ditching it when he gets the chance. Ryung is saddened he won't receive any more hands-on care from her, but is overjoyed she saved his life. He taunts her and asks if she was worried about him, pissing her off. Ryung asks for a date to celebrate her return to work, but Chateau pretends to sleep and starts snoring. In the past, Chateau cries in the back seat while Ryung Ha drives in the front, and a mysterious boy in the back tries calming her down and putting her to sleep. 3 weeks later, Chateau suddenly wakes from her dream to a private number calling. Ryung says good morning and asks how her boss reacted to the situation. After the incident, Chateau gave Ritzland the silent treatment and bowed with endless apologies. He says she was still on probation and was supposed to check in with him 3 times a day. He plans to track her location with a tracker on her phone. Chateau was prepared for any punishment and admits she was in partial cooperation with Ryung Ha-sung. She would even accept if he sold them both out to another organization. Jim, however, thinks that was harsh and says working with Ryung was splendid. Meanwhile, the black market bum eavesdrops and wishes they would just leave already. Hearing Jim's reaction, Ryung thinks that was convenient for him. He asks what they planned for her first day back, but Chateau refuses to tell him. Ryung immediately realizes they haven't told her yet because they don't want him finding out, which irritates her. He informs her he was taking a trip today, but when she doesn't care at all, he asks if she was worried about not having him around. She says no. Ryung tells her she was cold, then asks her to wait for him. After he hangs up, she vaguely remembers that hand and wonders if it was his. On her first day back, Ritzland asks if she's okay, but she gives him attitude and claims she had to stay home for 3 weeks. Jim sees the Titanic they were boarding and immediately fantasizes about having fun with Chateau, but Ritzland calls him a midget. Ritzland explains this was a private 1-week voyage. They'll be disguised as guests to guard an important client. He's a financier involved in the travel industry, with connections to major figures in finance and politics. Ritzland is also related to him. When the ship sets sail, Ryung smiles and picks out a balloon, while the lunatic twink comes by for one as well. In the past, a mysterious man named Donnie finds a peasant boy in an institution, gives him the name Ryung Ha-sung, and offers him a home. Back in the present, Jim reports nothing out of the ordinary, and Chateau reports the same. Ritzland checks in before being pulled away by a blonde baddie. Apparently, the client was actually Ritzland's wife, explaining why he was so vague and claimed she was a man during the briefing. Hawk Ritzland was born into a wealthy corporate family. By 20, she had already founded a successful business, and her net worth was now in the tens of billions. Ritzland struck gold since he was a broke, pitiful bounty hunter. Jim downs another glass, claiming Ritzland was a garbage boss for slaving them while he was busy clapping his wife on a cruise. He asks Chateau if she wants another drink, but when she declines, he smacks his lips and walks off. Seconds later, Ryung appears behind her and tells her to smile since it's a party. Jim returns with 2 drinks anyway, but finds Chateau missing. While dragging her away, Ryung jokes that she was forcefully dragging him into a room and calls her a wildflower. Chateau demands to know why he was on the ship. Ryung asks what she'd think if his target was the very client they were guarding. He offers her a proposition. As long as she's nearby and keeping an eye on him, he promises not to make a move. He asks if she wanted her boss and his wife to have a good time, but she thinks he's just messing with her. He admits that's partially true and starts laughing. Chateau reports the situation to Ritzland. She suggests taking Ryung up on his offer since his wife's safety was their priority. He requests his own cabin, a cruise card, and for Chateau to accompany him the entire voyage. Ritzland asks if she was okay with it, but Chateau admits she was the reason he was there, so she'll tolerate it. Hours later, Hawk asks Ritzland not to stay up too late. He puts on his headphones and continues surveilling Ryung. Ryung thinks it was rude, but Chateau tells him to pretend it's a piece of decor. When he asks who was spying, she refuses to expose them and suggests he get some sleep. He asks if she wanted to lay with him, but she absolutely refuses and offers to take the sofa. Ryung asks if she was planning to sleep or secretly waiting for him to make a move to crack. He suddenly lies down and says he was joking. Raising a hand over his head, he asks if she has trouble sleeping because of nightmares. When she pulls the blanket over herself, he sighs and says goodnight. Meanwhile, Hawk wakes Ritzland with a cup of tea. At 4 a.m., Ryung notices Chateau was still awake and tells her to take the bed. Chateau tells him not to worry, but he says he meant for herself, not to sleep together. When she declines again, he walks over and says he wanted that spot. She tucks herself under the blanket, so he picks her up and evicts her onto the bed. She asks if he was satisfied, but he wanted some action before he was. When he lies down, she immediately pulls out her pistol. He says he wasn't up to any diddy activities and promises to return to the couch once she falls asleep. After she finally falls asleep, he pulls the blanket down and realizes she must have trusted him to fall asleep around him. He notices she was pale and sleep-deprived, then picks up the gun and says goodnight. The next morning, Jim stays up all night but comes out to find Ritzland snuggled up and beams his head with a gooner rag. Ryung pulls on Chateau's cheeks, but she shoves him aside like an unwanted orphan child. During breakfast, Ryung criticizes her for only bringing suits since she was supposed to blend in as a guest and suggests taking her shopping. At the ship's inner mall, Chateau receives a call from Jim while in the fitting room, but Ryung asks if she needs help putting the outfit on. She declines. Thinking she'd be finished by now if everything was okay, he pulls the curtain aside for the big reveal. After the call, Jim receives notice that backup would be boarding that afternoon. Once revealed, Ryung thinks she looked good enough to crack and asks to see the other side. Chateau thinks it was too revealing and asks for something else, but Ryung says it was already pretty modest. She asks for something easier to move around in, but he doesn't think it's necessary and pulls her out. She trips, but he romantically catches her and spins her around. A saleswoman walks over and asks if everything's alright. Ryung immediately asks for the dress. She looks at his ugly face, but he simply gives her an okay, pissing Chateau off yet again. While walking, Ryung mentions he'll bust out the tuxedo that night, but notices she seemed down and asks what was wrong. She stops and asks why he cared when he was the one surveilling her. Ryung thinks that wasn't nice. Suddenly, Ritzland calls and informs her 2 new guards had boarded the ship and could relieve her of duty. He then asks to speak with Ryung. Ritzland makes it clear they had no intention of targeting him, but that could change depending on the circumstances. He admits he'll continue pretending not to know about their relationship. When Ryung tells him to get to the point, Ritzland says Chateau's full name, Chateau Noble, and asks if it sounded familiar. He explains Chateau has no memory of her past and asks if Ryung could spare some time to talk that night. After the call, Ritzland asks Jim to take over surveillance, saying he had something to take care of. While Chateau showers, Ryung readies his pistol and leaves to meet Ritzland. Meanwhile, Ritzland wishes he'd brought someone with him, unsure whether Ryung was someone who could be reasoned with. He wanted to learn who Ryung Ha-sung really was and get a clearer picture of Chateau's past. Chateau comes out of the shower and finds a note from Ryung saying he'll be back. Chateau reports to Jim that Ryung had snuck away, but Jim informs her the boss had stepped out and gone radio silent. She suddenly remembers their phone call and immediately heads out. The twink from before appears before Ritzland with a butterfly knife drawn and charges toward him. Chateau hears wind over the radio and asks if Ritzland can hear her. Ryung answers instead, informing her he's on deck 9 of the upper deck. He tells her to hurry and call a doctor. Chateau asks what he's doing there, but he ignores the question and tells Ritzland help is on the way and it's up to him to hang on. Looking at the wound, Ryung is surprised he didn't die on the spot. Chateau yells for him to respond, but Jim tells her to stay calm. Ryung says he'll die for this, then chases Jinon across the upper deck. He catches up and fires, but Jinon dodges and throws knives into his gun. Ryung fires again at his head, but the frame is misaligned from the knife, causing him to miss. Chateau reaches Ritzland while Jinon escapes. She informs the others there's a knife lodged in his throat and the paramedics are on the way. Ritzland tells her it wasn't Ryung, and she says she understands. He whispers that it wasn't her fault as the others come running. Hawk and Jim board the helicopter with Ritzland, but Chateau disappears. She watches the chopper leave, deciding she had to rendezvous with Ryung to find out what happened. Moments later, Jinon approaches, introduces himself, and asks for a moment of her time. He reaches into his pocket, and Chateau immediately pulls her pistol. Jinon tells her not to worry because it won't blow up. When he presses play, a dog barks at a doorbell. A woman answers, and a delivery man asks if she was Anna Dankworth. Hearing this, Chateau trembles and lowers her firearm. Jinon laughs at how easy she was to negotiate with. He asks for a favor and tells her to sell Ryung out to him. After all, it was practically her job. Meanwhile, Ryung is back in their cabin repairing his busted-up pistol. Seconds later, Chateau walks in and points her pistol at him. Ryung asks if she already knew it wasn't him, and she admits she did. When he asks if she met with Jinon, she starts shaking while explaining the situation. Ryung sighs, unloads his pistol, and disarms himself. He asks if she confirmed whether she was supposed to hand him over dead or alive. When she asks what he's doing, Ryung tells her to stay calm and assures her he would never hurt her. He asks her to explain exactly what Jinon instructed her to do. She was ordered to hand him over alive at the next port, Barosela. Earlier, Chateau initially declined Jinon's request, claiming it was beyond her capabilities. She asked if he could find someone else for the job, but Jinon said that wouldn't happen. He approached her because of her relationship with his target, Ryung Ha-sung. He asks if threatening to kill her mother on command wasn't enough, then suggests stabbing someone else she knew in the throat instead. Back in the present, Chateau admits she knew something like this could happen, but for some reason, she couldn't reject him. Ryung reassures her she has nothing to feel guilty about because it was his fault. Chateau says there's still so much she doesn't know. She doesn't know her real name, her parents, or where she came from. She doesn't even remember anything before living with her foster parents. Everything was hazy for some reason. Even though she shouldn't know anything about him, he's so deeply seared into her mind that it makes her sick. Ryung thinks that was quite a speech and suggests clearing her head. He offers her a cold drink, then says he'll take care of everything for her. Chateau asks how much he was willing to shoulder for her. Ryung replies with anything and everything he was capable of doing, even if she didn't believe him. For once, she does believe him. He's already saved her multiple times and continued helping her, but there was a limit. She didn't think he could accept such a selfish request as giving up his own life. Ryung ignores the question and tells her to pack her things. They'll take a short break, then move out. Chateau admits that when she pointed the gun at him, she was hoping she'd fail and he would kill her. That way, her pitiful life would finally end. Just as she's about to unsubscribe, Ryung rushes over and stops her before the glass breaks. He grabs her wrist, forcing her to drop the pistol. When Ryung demands to know what she's doing, Chateau asks how she was supposed to stop the people around her from dying. Even if they escaped this time, she was sure it would eventually happen again. Ryung backs away and says he couldn't accept that. Chateau snaps and asks why it even mattered to him, but he grabs her, says he has his own reasons, and throws her to the ground. He begins squeezing her artery and asks if it was painful. Judging by how hard she struggled, it looked like she didn't want to die anymore. As Chateau starts losing consciousness, Ryung apologizes, squeezes harder, and she blacks out. Meanwhile, Hawk informs the other two guards that Ritzland was in the ICU and it was up to him to hang on. Jose, however, reveals the ship reported the boss had a seizure and was airlifted away. They covered up the crime and planned to continue the cruise as scheduled. He thinks something fishy is going on aboard the ship. Elsewhere, Donnie tells Jinon to continue as planned and have a safe trip. Mifu Trash talks his brother, claiming he would have done a better job, but Donnie criticizes him for it. He orders him to get off the table looking like a Burger King bum. It was Jinon's first job, so some problems were to be expected. In the past, Ryung skips hanging out with his buds to greet Donnie at the train station. Donnie pats him on the head and says he's grown since the last time. When they sit down for dinner, Ryung thanks him for giving him his name, saying he finally became his own person afterward. He says he's been studying hard so he could be useful to him. Suddenly, the diddler asks if Ryung could do him a favor. After putting her to sleep, Ryung wipes the tears from her eyes and brushes her hair aside. In her dreams, she returns to her past, crying in the backseat of a car with Ryung. He asks for her name, then introduces himself, which finally gets her to stop crying. The next morning, Jinon has already killed Jose and the other guard, tossing them overboard. At the hospital, Ritzland finally wakes up, and the doctor tells the nurse to contact his hot wife. Hawk informs Jim of his recovery, and the doctor's news that he's recovering quickly. Jim suggests celebrating and heading down to Barosela port afterward. For now, he asks Hawk to stay at the hospital where the police are for her own safety. He thinks it's strange that he hasn't heard from Chateau or the others since last night. Suddenly, a biker pulls up beside him, taps on his window, then headshots him. When Ryung arrives at Barossa port, Jinon runs up and asks where Miss Chateau is. Ryung tells the twink he's here, meaning the delivery was successful, and asks if the transaction was completed. Meanwhile, Ryung left Chateau in a tanning bed with a sticky note telling her not to use it. In her dreams, she's still riding in the back seat of the car and crying. She tells Ryung her name is Chateau Noble. He tells her it's okay if she doesn't believe him, but he's on her side and will take her somewhere safe. While walking, Ryung thinks it's a shame since he bought her a nice dress and planned a date. Elsewhere, Donnie receives a report that the other detective was taken out. The man asks if he should head to the hospital and dispose of Ritzland, but Donnie already made sufficient arrangements. Donnie informs him Jinon caught his target and rendezvoused with Nika. He plans to invite them to his residence and orders him to find Chateau. After patting him down, Jinon is surprised Ryung actually showed up unarmed. Nika asks Jinon to drive because he wants to discuss things with their guest. During the drive, he offers Ryung a cigarette, but Ryung is disgusted by the lung cancer behavior. Nika thinks it's strange their daddy wants to see him and even requested they bring him in alive. He calls it a hassle, then asks if Ryung knows what's going on. Ryung says he could think of a list of reasons, but he doesn't even know their chief's name, then asks who it is. Nika tells him it's Donald Bachman, but everyone calls him Donnie. Ryung thinks about it, then says he's never heard of him, surprising Nika. He laughs, grabs Ryung by the collar and pulls a gun on him. Nika tells him not to mess with him, then asks why Donnie is interested in him and who Ryung Ha-sung really is. Back on the boat, a short, dark figure approaches the tanning bed and finds Chateau inside. Jinon tells Nika to relax since Ryung isn't resisting. Nika thinks that isn't like him at all. He heard stories about Ryung's time in the Santukai from a dead associate, one he recently murdered. Ryung was ruthless during his time there, and it only took him 3 years to bring down an organization of 10,000. Nika demands to know his plan and asks if he intends to charm their boss before destroying them from the inside. Ryung says he has no idea what he's talking about and has no interest in their organization or their boss. He only came because he had no choice. When Ryung tells him to watch his mouth, Jinon demands he let him go since Ryung was his prey. Nika sighs and releases him. When Ryung wipes his shoulder, Nika pistol whips him in the skull. He apologizes to Jinon and asks him to put away the blade. He admits they weren't raised well either, then offers him a gooner rag to wipe off the blood. If Ryung had dodged or blocked, Nika would have shot him. He aimed for his temple from his blind spot, but Ryung turned, so the hit landed on his forehead instead. Nika thinks he's dangerous. Back on the boat, Jim wakes Chateau and tells her they need to leave since they're in danger of being attacked there. When they arrive at the estate, Nika informs Ryung he has to put on handcuffs and a blindfold once they get out. Ryung ignores him, and Nika thinks he's no fun. Jim walks Chateau out, saying they need to disembark by evening before the ship leaves. Chateau says she can walk on her own, then asks what happened to his head. Jim tells her someone tried to Lil Boozy him and put him on a shirt, but apparently the shooter missed, and a piece of glass only scratched his forehead. The shooter must have thought he got him and left. He couldn't reach the other two, and their location tracking cut off at sea. However, thanks to the GPS on her phone, he was at least able to find her. When Jim asks what happened, the Lil Boozy around the corner cocks his pistol, causing Chateau to push Jim aside. The man steps out and asks who she was talking to. Chateau says his business is with her and asks if he was with Jinon. The man says she's well informed, then tells her Ryung Ha-sung has already been handed over. He says Ryung is so tamed that it's throwing everyone off. People really become docile when you know their weakness. He apologizes and claims she'll be sticking with him for that exact reason. As he approaches, Jim smashes through the side window with a chair and the man fires back. Chateau pulls her firearm, shoots him in the leg and shoulder, then rushes in and destroys his jaw. Jim notices it's the same man who tried to 50 Cent him. Crew members rush over, and Jim immediately lies about a possible terrorist attack, telling them to stay back. Chateau hears a phone ringing. When she pulls it out, the screen says, "Daddy." Meanwhile, Donnie finds it strange that the assassin hasn't answered, while Jinon opens the door for Nika and Ryung to walk in. After Donnie welcomes him, he begins ranting about how the weak are always abandoned. Children from war-torn lands become child soldiers. Children born into poverty are sold by their own parents into slavery. They're doped up and forced to deal drugs on the streets. Their existence is erased by the world's injustices, and no one ever knows. He takes these children in and gives them names. Ryung says he isn't here for charity work. Donnie orders Jinon to remove his blindfold. Once it's removed, Donnie introduces himself and says his name is already known to him, claiming he once gave that name to a child. The others ask if it was true and whether he was really part of the family. Donnie explains he gave the name Ryung Ha-sung to a boy who became part of his family, but this wasn't him. This man was a phony deliberately using his name. Meanwhile, Jim and Chateau smuggle the bootleg assassin out of the port in a truck. truck. Jim realizes everything was connected. Since they wanted her to deliver Ryung to Borosela, they likely had a base there. He thinks it was smart they didn't turn him over to the police. Depending on how large the organization was, they could have had the Borosela police in their pockets. He asks if she plans to save Ryung, but she says she has no plans since he'd been a nuisance from day one. Apparently, Ryung produced an entire set of forged documents during his time with the Santukai. He had identification numbers from his country of origin, along with residence, medical, and academic records identical to those Donnie created for the original Ryung Ha Sung. Donnie asks who he really is, and why he assumed the identity of the boy he named. Ryung smirks and calls him a pitiful breeder. He thought he'd be meeting someone more important, but says his training regimen wasn't even that impressive. After all, anyone could pick a stray dog off the street and give it a name. When Ryung sarcastically calls him Supreme Commander, Jinon pulls a blade and tries to kill him, but Nika catches it with his bare hand. Jinon is confused, but Nika cracks his jaw and sends him to the ground. Nika tells him it wasn't his place to decide whether Ryung lived or died. Ryung quietly pulls out a pin while Mifu calls Jinon an idiot. Donnie says it's been a rough couple of days and tells Jinon to get some rest. When the man wakes up, Chateau points a gun at his head and demands to know where Ryung Ha Sung is. The man says it'd be easier if they just turned themselves in because they'll never stop hunting her. He reveals his boss, Donnie, owns the underground armory in Borosela. The locals know him as the war starter. Meanwhile, Donnie lectures Jinon about controlling his emotions, saying he'll let him loose soon enough. Nika interrogates Ryung, asking his real name and where he was born. Ryung says it's a waste of time and tells him to question him while his daddy is around. Nika asks him to be nice since he got injured trying to protect him. He admits he's more interested in Ryung's time in the Santukai and the kinds of jobs he carried out. Truthfully, he just wants to know if he could kill him in a one-on-one fight. He says it's a good thing Jinon did a crap job searching him for weapons. If it had been him, he would have caught it. Before moving forward, Chateau makes two requests of Jim. First, she wants guards stationed outside her mother's house 24/7. Second, she wants to be terminated from Ritzland's support company. Jim asks why she'd quit, but Chateau says what she's about to do has to stay off the record. Nika kicks the table, but Ryung breaks free of his restraints, lunges forward, and lands a powerful kick. Ryung reaches for his pistol, but Nika punches him in the side. After jumping back, Nika asks if he reopened an old wound, saying his moves were too obvious. Two bum guards rush in and scold Nika for messing around. They order Ryung to put his hands up and tell Nika they'll take over. Instead, Nika tells the old fool to pay attention. Ryung redirects the pistol behind him and headshots the man in front. He spins around and fires the first man's gun into his partner's jaw. Nika and Ryung erupt into a shootout, alerting the rest of the guards in the mansion. The stupid peasants at the front gate watch a dump truck barreling toward them and stand there long enough to get bodied. One survives and calls for backup. The guards can't believe Ryung killed so many of them and wonder where Nika went. They've already stationed groups around their daddy while others search the outer perimeter. Ryung reaches the emergency stairs but slowly loses consciousness and collapses. He suddenly remembers sitting in the car beside the real Ryung Ha Sung. Ryung asks for his name, but the boy says it doesn't matter. What matters is what Ryung Ha is going to do moving forward. Back in the present, Donnie diddles Mifu, thinking the whole situation is quite sad, while Jinon heads out to battle. Nika approaches Ryung, kicks him in the face, then stomps on his wound while taunting him. Ryung rolls his eyes back and thinks it was a lame way to die. Nika says it's a shame and kicks him again. As Nika walks away, he hears the commotion outside and tells Ryung they might have company. Hours earlier, Chateau and Jim tortured the man for the location. Jim tries to stop her but eventually gives up, saying she never listens anyway. He takes off his coat and hands it to her, saying it gets chilly in the city and it's his job to look after the staff. Chateau makes it clear she wants to be terminated. However, Jim says that would require extensive paperwork, ammunition counts, weapon returns, and even a farewell party. When Chateau sighs, Jim hands her the coat and tells her to come back safely. After Chateau infiltrates the compound, Ryung snaps a guard's neck, enters the control room, and kills the two inside. He walks over to the monitors and sees Chateau searching for him. Meanwhile, Chateau wonders why he always shows up when least expected, but never when she actually needs him. One of the guards catches up, pins her down, and orders everyone to cease fire. However, gunfire continues from every direction, and bodies start dropping like flies. Ryung approaches from behind and shoots the guard in the head. When Chateau turns around, Ryung calls her a fool for coming after him. Days after escaping, Ryung and Chateau hid in a homeless camp. The bum returned with antibiotics and supplies to treat Ryung's wounds. He offered painkillers for extra money, but Ryung declined. When Chateau thanked him, he said his tent was right next door, so they should keep it down if they were going to crack each other. Apparently, they jumped into a taxi the moment they escaped the mansion. It looked like Chateau had it prepared. Since then, their whereabouts had been unknown. Donnie turned and asked Nika what his excuse was for letting Ryung escape. Nika apologized and claimed he didn't do it on purpose. He admitted he took it too far, then offered to take out Ryung Ha Sung himself. Ryung was disappointed since they were supposed to have a big date, yet they were crashing in some homeless man's tent. His wounds started aching, and when he laid down, he asked Chateau why she came after him. However, Chateau asked why he surrendered himself just for her. She was the one being threatened, so he had no reason to. The things he'd done for her were too extreme. Ryung deflected, saying no matter what happened, she'd just find a way to complain about him. However, he admitted crashing in with a stolen dump truck was hilarious. Chateau thought about it and figured he would have escaped on his own. Instead, he ended up saving her again. After she apologized, Ryung squealed, and when she checked on him, he pulled her down and hugged her tightly, claiming this was her punishment. He reminded her he wanted a thanks, not an apology. After letting go, he admitted he should be thanking her. He would have given up if he hadn't heard her outside making a commotion. Smiling, he properly thanked her. Donnie informed the others there was no longer any reason to capture Ryung. He would have been an excellent asset, but after what he did, he'd have to pay with his life. However, his real target was Chateau Danksworth. She was the prize that slipped through his fingers 17 years ago, and it wouldn't happen again. Meanwhile, Ryung and Chateau readied their pistols as a shadowy figure approached. When the footsteps reached the tent, Ryung instructed her to only shoot when he did. The man opened the tent, and they pointed their guns, while the man next door was having a French kiss frenzy. The man apologized, saying he scored some sacred booze from the shelter and wanted to share it with his fellow bums. The homeless man apologized for his struggling alcoholic buddy, George. When he started asking about them, Chateau grew concerned, but Ryung told her to relax. The man introduced Ryung as his son and Chateau as his wife. She was appalled as Ryung thanked him for being best buds with his bum father. Chateau started opening up his wound while the man whispered to Ryung in a foreign language, asking if that was cool. With a tear in his eye, Ryung claimed he and his wife had been searching all over the world for him. George was touched. He busted out the bottle and poured them shots to celebrate. Ryung thought it was a hassle, but downed it anyway. Chateau saw the poison and declined. When the man insisted, Ryung snatched the cup and, with the eyes of a killer, told him to respect the lady's decision. He then claimed she had to watch her body since she was expecting a mini-me. She slapped him. The next morning, Chateau thanked the bum for letting them leech off him. While walking, a man checked Ryung, but he threatened his life, and the man backed off. After 3 more shoulders, Ryung was disappointed with how little money they'd gotten. Chateau thought it was frightening how good he was at it. Ryung wasn't proud of it, but it was the only way to keep himself fed as a kid. His parents abandoned him, so he had to learn nasty skills before he could read or write. Chateau apologized. In addition to himself, he now had to take care of her. When she asked how she could make it up, he stuffed a burger into her face and thanked her for the meal. He asked for no more apologies unless she wanted to get punished again. On the way to his hideout, Chateau asked who those people were. She looked into the organization, but they weren't registered anywhere. She thought it'd be best to stay out of their sights. However, they'd already threatened her loved ones, so she couldn't turn a blind eye. She begged him for more information because she didn't want anyone else getting involved. Ryung firmly declined. He claimed he'd do anything for her except that, and asked her to leave it to him. Chateau stopped walking and turned away. When he stopped her, she apologized for letting her guard down and said she'd handle it herself. Suddenly, Ryung snatched and kidnapped her. He pinned her against the wall and made it clear he could have his way if he wanted to. He'd start by snapping her wrist. Chateau asked if he expected her to become his slave. Ryung grabbed her hand and pointed her gun at his heart. He claimed this was how it all started and told her to pull the trigger. When she reluctantly eased her finger off the trigger, Ryung let go and apologized for not leaving her alone. He couldn't after finally finding her all these years later. When he promised again that he was on her side, she flashed back 17 years to hiding inside a closet. The boy outside called out to her and opened the door. Moments later, he was lying in a puddle of his own blood. Days earlier, Ryung received an assignment from Donnie during dinner. A man named List Noble would be arriving in town in 5 days. While he was very much alive, officially he'd been dead for 5 years and on the run the entire time. Ryung was ordered to escort him safely into Barosela. After accepting the task, Donnie smiled, handed him a pistol, and they got into the car. Meanwhile, a peasant boy ran barefoot through the slums while goons chased him. As Ryung walked, the filthy boy suddenly bumped into him. The men caught up and told Ryung to go home. One of them said to be gentle since they couldn't sell damaged organs. When they picked the boy up, Ryung drew his pistol and requested they let him go. In his mind, he thought Mr. Donnie would have helped him, then put a bullet through the man's skull. The other tackled him and started strangling him, but the peasant boy gave him a brain tumor and took him out. As they stood over the bodies, slum dwellers poured out, claiming they'd call the cops. Ryung panicked and started running, but the boy quickly caught up. Suddenly, the frail boy dropped to the ground and begged for his help. Elsewhere, List tucked Chateau into a suitcase and apologized through tears before shutting the case. The boy woke up in Ryung's dorm room with his wounds patched up. When Ryung returned, the boy pulled a pistol on him and instructed him to follow his directions. Ryung informed him he'd already removed the bullets, then slammed him to the ground, saying he didn't like fighting. After feeding him, Ryung asked if he needed a place to stay. The boy thought it was odd and asked why he was helping him. Before Ryung could answer or even ask for his name, the boy fell back asleep from exhaustion. Days later, Ryung's friends criticized him for not hanging out lately. When he got back, he found the boy sleeping on the floor. He tried to cover him with a blanket, but the boy woke up, saw his kidnappers, and panicked. On the 5th day, the boy thanked him for helping him and said he'd be gone when Ryung returned. Ryung asked if he had anywhere to go, then offered to take him to the station. Meanwhile, List ran out of the station while being chased by an assassin. Ryung took the boy there and bought him a ticket to another town. He apologized for not being able to do more. The boy asked what he was apologizing for, then began opening up about his past. Apparently, a well-dressed man approached him, saying he'd help him. After following him, they beat the crap out of him, dislocated both shoulders, stuffed him into a shipping container, and sent him there. Those were the kinds of people he'd been around his whole life, so it was difficult for him to believe someone like Ryung existed. When the train arrived, Ryung asked for his name, but his phone suddenly started ringing. The boy sighed and walked away. When Ryung answered, List sounded distressed, requested his assistance, and gave him directions. Suddenly, Ryung heard a gunshot and screamed out to him, but the boy slapped the phone from his hand. He told Ryung the shooter was on the other end and not to say a word. After killing his target, Seung-woo was ordered to pull out. Ryung took off running, and the boy followed. They reached the station's public lockers and opened one at the end. Inside was a suitcase. They opened it and found Chateau sleeping inside. They headed to the parking lot, where the boy unlocked a car and told Ryung to get in or not. Chateau remembered her father as she woke up, only to find herself in the back seat with 2 boys in front. She started crying and said she had to tinkle. After bringing her to a gas station, the boy said they were reckless and should have had her go in the bushes. They were being watched and had to move immediately. Ryung asked her not to cry, but the boy suggested asking for her name. Ryung asked for her name, but she kept crying. He introduced himself as Ryung Ha-sung, then asked again. The girl finally gave her name before asking for her father to come find her soon. Ryung remembered her father entrusted her to him and told her she didn't have to believe him, but he was on her side and would take her somewhere safe. After she finally fell asleep, Ryung thanked the boy for sticking it out and for saving him the other day. He suddenly realized the boy instructed him to ask for her name, then asked him to introduce himself. The boy claimed he was an outsider and it'd only complicate things. He then asked what Ryung planned to do moving forward, and if he understood what it meant to take the girl with him. Ryung didn't understand. The boy told him to keep his guard up and said he truly wished him well. Hours later, they found a cabin, and Ryung headed inside to check it out. Outside, the boy checked whether Chateau had a fever. She woke up and asked if he was the man from before. The boy said yes, he was Ryung Ha, and reassured her everything was all right. After she fell back asleep, he was relieved she didn't start crying again, but Ryung suddenly appeared like a maniac. After setting up camp, Ryung accidentally mentioned they were heading to Barosala. When the boy repeated it, Ryung panicked, but the boy said he'd pretend he didn't hear since it was none of his business. He'd get out in a random town somewhere along the way. Ryung started overthinking everything since the boy hadn't told him a single thing about himself and reached for the pistol on his hip. When the boy noticed, he suggested taking him out first. When Ryung reluctantly pulled away, the boy warned him again that his half-ass approach would be the end of him. Ryung admitted he was scared of him and asked him to stop saying things like that. The boy apologized and started leaving. Ryung reached for the pistol again, but the boy turned around, begged him not to die, then walked away. He looked back, sighed, and started running. Ryung tossed the gun aside and ran after him. He found he was already gone and called him an asshole for never telling him his name. Suddenly, Chateau woke up and called out for her father and the boy. Meanwhile, the boy told himself nothing good came from getting involved with other people. A car passed by and pulled over. The guy he whacked in the head for Ryung stepped out. Seconds later, the bums from the gas station arrived after tailing him. The boy ran into the woods and they chased after him. Chateau got up but slipped on the gun and fell over. The sound of an owl hooting outside frightened her. Moments later, Ryung returned, realized she was missing, then heard whimpering coming from the back room. Meanwhile, one of the bikers caught up to the boy, but he smashed his head in and sent him over the cliff. The other biker rushed over and kneed him in the stomach. Then the bum arrived and cracked his skull open with a bat, claiming the boy was all his. Ryung walked into the back room and realized Chateau was still terrified after waking up with strangers. He approached slowly and reassured her he was on her side. The moment he opened the door, she panicked and immediately shot him. After beating the crap out of the peasant boy, the man tells him to stay alive since he still had to sell off his organs. He claims he'll go take care of his friend next. Back in the cabin, Ryung feels his body going cold as he lies on the floor. Chateau sits trembling in the corner, repeatedly saying she's sorry. Despite the bullet hole in his throat, Ryung forces himself up, determined to get Chateau out of there at all costs. Holding his throat, he drags her out of the cabin while she continues apologizing. In the present, Ryung drags her to his safe house as she continues to apologize. The boy gets up with a stick and attacks the man, but it has no effect. When he collapses, the man taunts him, saying all he had to do was wait to get sold off. The boy calls him an asshole, then suddenly stabs him in the eye with a twig. As the man screams in agony, the boy comes up from behind, smashes in his ugly face, and proceeds to beat him to death. Afterwards, he starts limping back toward the cabin. A man driving by stops and tries to help, but the boy keeps moving. When he finally makes it back to the cabin, he's saddened that Ryung had already left. He goes inside looking for a first aid kit, but notices blood on the floor. Following the trail into the back room, he finds a puddle of fresh blood and the gun Ryung had, then realizes what happened. Hours earlier, Ryung had apologized for being pushy about his name. The boy opens up and admits he's had multiple names over the years. He doesn't even remember his original, and none of the ones he's had ever stuck. After collapsing, the man who passed by called for help, and they found him in the cabin. He remained unconscious in the hospital for a week until a detective stopped by to visit. As the man sits down, the boy reaches into his cast. The man pulls out a passport and asks if he knew him. After seeing Ryung's photo, the boy pulls a box cutter, but the detective snatches his wrist and puts him down. The boy demands to know where he was, but the detective informs him he was already dead. Ryung had died from the gunshot wound to the neck he suffered in the cabin. Apparently, he died in a town a few hundred miles away after driving an entire day while mortally wounded. The detective reassures him he wasn't a suspect, but tells him to forget everything he knew about Ryung Ha-sung. It was the only way for him to stay safe. The boy asks about the young girl with him, but the detective plays ignorant. He lets out that footprints at the cabin suggested Ryung had been dragging someone, but tells him to forget that too. After getting out of the hospital, the boy returns to the first town and visits Ryung's apartment. His friends stop by and ask if he knows or has seen him. They then ask for his name, and he says he's Ryung Ha-sung. Thinking back to the detective's words, he asks Ryung Ha-sung if it would be sad to just forget. On his last breath, Ryung gets Chateau to the town where Abel lived. He wonders how the boy was doing and if he managed to make it into town. As his life fades away, he prays with his last breath that when Chateau wakes up, she wouldn't remember his horrible nightmare. In the present, Chateau wakes up in the safe house with Ryung sleeping beside her. She reaches for him, but he suddenly wakes up. He tells her she fell asleep the moment they arrived and had been asleep for a day and a half. She reaches for his face, then starts pinching him with force. Ryung asks if she was angry, but she was just worried he was a ghost. She suddenly admits she shot and killed a man named Ryung Ha-sung. She demanded to know why he approached her with that name if he knew the truth. She asks if the man she shot was someone close to him, but he simply leans in and comforts her. He warns her the walls were thin and to talk softly. She then admits Ryung Ha-sung was only trying to help her, but she shot him. He kept bleeding, yet still took her hand and brought her somewhere safe. After all that, she still forgot about him and continued on. He tells her that isn't true. Ryung finally realizes why she could never reject him. All this time, she had never truly forgotten his name. That made him happy. The next day, Chateau asks how much it would cost to hire him for his services. She didn't want their relationship to be so one-sided and wanted a fresh start. Ryung thinks back to their hug and believes she was so cold since it sounded like she wanted to sweep everything under the rug. Ryung then asks if she wants to hire him to get rid of Donnie and his people to protect her mother, but says he couldn't do that. For example, if she went to check on her mother, they were sure to be waiting to take advantage. He suggests staying put and not reacting to any of their threats. He then explains he would never take her on as a client, but offers to do business together as a peer. When Ryung smiles, Chateau realizes they are now officially partners. She then asks what kind of compensation he would even want. Knowing she would just pay him with her insurance money, he declines and asks what she thinks he would even want to be compensated with. If you made it this far, like and subscribe for more recaps like this.